Awesome, great, glorious day it is. This is the day the Lord has made, and indeed we shall rejoice and be glad in it. My, oh my, this is we'll call it second season, because now we have a whole new setup now for the Umubanga podcast. So, yeah, hopefully you have been blessed with the previous episodes which we've put up. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and share, so that your friend can be inspired, transformed, as well as informed of the goodness of God and the many, many people we are profiling. So our guest today is the senior pastor and president of the City of the Lord Church, which currently has 4 branches with an estimated membership of 1,000 members. Please do watch. Yeah. He hosts the annual Dominion conferences and multiple Dominion nights as part of his mandate, and carries a burning passion to empower people to dominate their various mountains of influence. Our guest is a highly motivated man who is passionate about seeing people fulfill their destiny, and is known for a lifestyle full of signs and wonders that leave the watching eye with a sense of hope for a better life. And to top it off, he is a gifted writer, singer, and leader, as well as a great husband. We should emphasize that. What more could the Umubanga podcast ask for that having a special guest who will give us a dose of what it means to live a dominant life. So ladies and gentlemen, put your virtual hands together. Let's welcome Apostle Fredrick Kaluluma. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much. That introduction was interesting.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I think I haven't been at Umubanga in a while.
Yes.
But I've been seeing the works, and I love how there's the great business end, but then you still always find a way to emphasize your calling and assignment.
Yes, sir.
And that assignment ends up giving platform to other people like myself. So Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you. And we are glad to have you and host you on our podcast.
Thank you so much.
First things first, how does it feel having this read to you? Because you're listening to it.
For a moment, I was like, is that me?
Yeah.
But honestly, it gives me a sense of gratitude to God. God has given me a lot of grace.
Yeah.
And also a sense of, we can do better.
Yeah.
We can do more.
Yeah.
It's very inspiring to hear that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So look, for somebody watching this and they're like, who is Apostle Fred?
That's a question I ask people a lot. I ask them usually, tell me about yourself.
Yeah.
And yet it's a question I'm rarely asked. So it's not one I'm an expert at answering.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, so born Fredrick Madaliso Kaluluma, I'm 29 this year.
Awesome.
I already turned 29 actually. So yeah, I'm 29 this year. I'm a Christian, a child of God, a Zambian citizen, very responsible, a father to a little girl named Malombo. And beyond that, somebody who's got a passion to share what God has placed in my heart with everyone. So I'm someone who will go the lengths to ensure that everyone gets to experience what I've experienced, and also what I've seen in the Word. And I'm also somebody who genuinely believes that God's children can all be the best in every area. And I'm passionate about that. So by God's grace, I'm a pastor. I'm leading the City of the Lord Church. And I've also been privileged to have, for example, I led the Word Empowerment Movement for about 10 years. So I've been privileged to be one of those who's had a front row view of what God has been doing in Zambia, at least in the last 12 years.
Okay. Awesome. That's a good introduction. Look, in terms of family, where do you come from? Did you grow up in a Christian household? Look, the reasons why I always ask is that Zambia in 1991 declared a Christian nation. So we have the cover to say everybody in Zambia is a Christian. So how was your upbringing?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I grew up with my mother, father, and my sister, Alice. And of course, different people would be home every now and then. So I would say for us as a family, the major change came when I was about 5 years old.
Okay.
When I was 5 years old, according to my mom's narration, she had developed a problem with her eye. And so at that point, I think they would go to church, but not that consistently. So she was watching television, right? I think it was Pastor Benny Hinn.
Yeah.
And he gave a word of knowledge about someone who had a challenge with her eye, and she got healed. So she decided she needed to start going to church.
Okay.
And so my dad found the church for her, and that was Olga Forward in Faith, because we were living in Kawata by then. So he didn't,
Patrick's Church.
yeah, he didn't come often. I think I can count the number of times. But he encouraged us and would drop us off. So in terms of so in terms of my Christian life, my mom played the biggest role.
Okay.
Once she found herself in the faith, she began training us in very peculiar ways. For example, sometimes she could buy chocolate and ice cream, put it in the fridge, and say, if you can pray with me 30 minutes, it's yours. So our aim, Alice and I, was the chocolate and ice cream. And would go there and she would lead us in these prayers for 30 minutes. And we just keep thinking, can these prayers end? We just want chocolate and ice cream.
Yeah.
And for sure, afterwards, we'd be given the chocolate and ice cream.
Yeah.
And then I had a very good Sunday school teacher. I haven't seen her in a while. Her name is Teacher Veronica. And she discovered I could speak when I was about 5 years old. So what she did is, you know that thing where they give the kids to say something in front of the church?
Yeah, or you do memory verses.
Yes, so I was given the first time and I stammered like crazy. And so she gives me again the next week. And the next week when I spoke, the church pastors, bishops are like, no, there's something special about this guy.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening, I'm like 5, 6, and my bishop and church pastor begin to put me on the program. Like, not with the Sunday school, but alone.
Okay.
And sometimes maybe there's like a church conference. I'll be the first speaker. Like, I'll be given 5 minutes to say something. I didn't really fully embrace or know what I was doing. I was just enjoying speaking. But as time went by, I realized that those were very instrumental moments in my life. Yeah.
Okay. So you grew up Zaoga.
Yes, I grew up in Zaoga all my life, actually, until City of the Lord Church.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Walk us through your school journey, like your build up in terms of, because I know you were at Material Boys.
I was. So before Material Boys, first I was at Machinga, wonderful school. And it's through there that I skipped a few grades. So
you're the bright kids in class.
So by the time I'm going to Material Boys, I was like, first day of grade 8, I was 10. So I really went there as a boy.
Wow. Okay, that's a huge jump.
I went to Material Boys as a boy.
Okay.
And my journey there was quite interesting. It was about that period, so grade 8, grade 9, I was no longer interested in spiritual stuff.
What changed? Was it the company? Was it?
I wanted to be cool. I think the change was internal.
Okay.
I think if you had to ask me, before then, I knew a lot about God, but I didn't know him personally. I didn't have a personal relationship with him. So it was easy to be influenced and maybe even influence myself, you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes we call everyone bad company, can't she?
You're the bad
You're the one.
Yeah.
So at that period, I honestly was not, being spiritual was not my biggest interest.
Yeah.
I had reduced on my going to church. You know, you get a bit older, so like someone, you can't be dragged with like chocolate and ice cream.
Yeah.
I wanted to be the next TI. I just wanted to be, that guy. You know? And so that's like grade 9, grade 8, grade 9, grade 10. So by then now, maybe what I've watched has changed. What I'm listening to has changed. I'm now trying to follow all the hardcore hip hop, like going all the way back. You start with the Tupacs and go to the VIG, go to.
Do you know how music is that to date, when you hear certain sounds, you even remember all the lyrics. It's just like, God.
And then I started noticing that there are certain things it was doing for me.
Yeah.
For example, you listen to a song by one of these hardcore rappers and you're walking in the road and suddenly you just feel like, if anyone touches me, I'm going to fight. I'm so glad I never got into any of those fights.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to fight.
Yeah.
But then My language is not right. I was like a normal kid, what I thought was a normal kid, really. And when I reached somewhere 11th grade, I'm on a bus going home, and I heard God speaking to me. That's how I transitioned.
Okay. So when did you give your life to Christ?
When I was in my 11th grade.
So when you're doing Sunday school, of course, you're still young. So that...
I would say I did acknowledge God even when I was younger. One would say I backslid, but I don't know. On my end, I like to think my journey started in my 11th grade. I really feel like
That's when now you had like your mind now was able to make decisions and say, okay, this is the step which I am going to take.
It was my decision.
Yeah.
I submitted to him as Lord. And also, it wasn't just a commitment it was now a commitment to me knowing him because I had known about him.
Yeah.
And to be honest, the first time I heard him speak to me and I was on a bus, it's not like I wasn't very interested. I was like, wait, did God just speak to me? And I felt him like on the inside speaking to me. So it's like, even now when I describe it, I'm trying to wonder what on earth was going through my 14-year-old brain. But then how I knew that I had believed is I'm with my friends one day, and I forgot what they were discussing. There was some activity they wanted to do. I said, no, guys, the other day God was speaking to me, and they all just, God was speaking to you. And that's how now no more friends for a while. And then now the guys at school who I used to laugh at, the ones who I used to think were over spiritual, were now the only group that could accommodate me for some time. So in my 11th grade, I totally surrendered. I made a decision that Jesus would be my Lord. And I also had an understanding of what I was doing.
Yeah.
Understood at that point that it meant I was now going to live a boring life. That's what I thought.
Yeah. So then at what point did you start with the empowerment movement? Because there are times I would like view your status and then you post like a throwback. I'm like, God is good. Yeah.
So I have
the growth. So at what point did you start with empowerment movement?
So high school goes on. High school, I joined the team that was leading in prayer. And I was in the background as one of the intercessors.
Yeah.
High school is done. There's a group of youths who were meeting to pray. I joined them. At church, I was also very involved. Then when I was about 17, that should have been 2012.
Yeah.
Somewhere in December, I had gone for a meeting. It was Night of Destiny with Pastor Chole.
Yeah.
And I'm seated. It was
Where was it? Mulungushi.
Mulungushi, yes. 24th December. It was a carol service first. I'm seated and I heard God say to me, you need to have a conference next week.
Next week, not even next year. Like, because it's December. So nice.
December 24th. And no, actually not next. Yeah, next week or something like that. And I remember we had one, I think early days of January. I was afraid to go to a conference, so I called it a meeting. So how the name even came about, I said a word empowerment meeting. I didn't want to go to a conference. I mean, in my head, I was like, who am I to host a conference? Yeah. And we had it at a Maka Lodge. My friend Kasonde Lamek Chombelimo, he helped out because that's where they were living. Yeah. And so he gave us a venue for free. I just posted online who wants to come, and had, I don't know how many, maybe 50, 60, 70 young people coming 2 days straight. And before we knew it, WEM had started, except this time now it was a movement. And I would say when we started, I wouldn't fully say I knew what I was doing. I'm just thinking, okay, look, I'm just sharing my passion here. And within the first meeting, I remember I said, does anyone here have a testimony? And they're like, when somebody comes, no, I couldn't hear in this ear. I can hear now. And in my head, I'm like, how on earth did that happen?
It wasn't me.
Don't ask me to try it. And before I knew it, within a couple of months, we had another meeting. This time, Vine Assemblies POG opened up their church because my friend Lawrence, the dad is a bishop there. Yeah. So they opened up their church and allowed us to use it for 2 days. And then, the momentum started increasing. By the time it was hitting July, we had another one. And this time now, a lot of young people are coming. The numbers started increasing. People were getting saved. And the healings and miracles just started gaining momentum. And then that's how I knew. I said, okay, I think this might be bigger than me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do understand that those Pastor Daniel, Prophet Gomezio, who else was? It was like a
Yeah. Some were there, like let's say in the beginning, and then maybe as time went by, some.
So who
were
did
not
you
there.
start with?
When starting, Lawrence Chileshe,
Okay.
Kasonde Chwomba Milimo was one of the starters. Other people were like they were not preaching, but they were part of us, like my sister Alice, people like Linda Namose, and the like. Then a few months later, David Fungo, who's now a doctor, joined us. Then Pastor Daniel joined us like July.
Okay.
Pastor Daniel first came as a musician. His first service, he was playing the keyboard.
That was before he as well received his call to.
I think he had already received it, but I think the platform to minister wasn't really there. And I don't think he was 100% confident that maybe Lusaka would receive his ministry. So first he comes as a musician, and then God had spoken to him saying, he also has to preach. So when I told him at first, he was a bit reluctant. And we put him to preach one day, and the rest is history. Then Prophet Gomezio and I had known each other for some time. But then after about a year, that's when he joined us.
Okay.
And then Pastor George Zulu as well. As time went by, a lot of people who've done amazing things, somehow, somewhere were part of us, or at least attended some of our meetings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome, because your guys would, I know it moved from the different churches and then now pushing bigger venues like Government Complex.
Yes.
And
To be honest, by then, I hadn't seen or heard of a young person daring to go to a venue like Government Complex. It was not very common.
yeah.
I remember the first time I went there and I'm told the bill. I'm like, whoa, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And suddenly we just became daring. Like, it felt like we had something to say.
Yep.
It felt like it was bringing a certain standard of excellence also to the body of Christ. And I'm so happy now that a young person can now have their first ever meeting and it's Government Complex, so it's Molongoshi or something.
Yeah, now like it's
a very normal thing.
As we had Pastor Cham, as he was narrating, to say stadium is just a venue.
Exactly.
So now Government Complex is like pretty much everyone is filling it up. Like
I know. And now with people like Pastor Cham, Pastor Daniel doing stadiums.
Yeah.
It's like it's bringing it within everyone's reach.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was quite interesting. Honestly, it's one of the most interesting periods of my life.
Yeah.
I learned a lot about leadership, a lot about life. I was able to learn through some of the mistakes I made, through some of the things I did well. It's one of the best periods of my life.
Now, coming back to your parents, you have in 11th grade, you received this call. Did you now go full time into it? Like, because you know how, like, when you switch, now as we grow older, we become wiser. But when you receive the call there and then, you're just like,
Now,
school is for the world. Let's just push and make Jesus famous and preach him.
I hear you.
Until we die.
So in 11th grade, when that happened, I would say suddenly the changes began to be noticed.
Yeah.
My dad found it strange because he was now hearing me praying loudly. Those are not things he was used to. He's like, okay, yeah, the mom does that, but him. And then, unfortunately, that year he passed away.
Okay.
Yeah. But interestingly, before he died, for the first time, he called me to his room and said, I would like you to pray for me and just like preach the word to me.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest privileges I ever had.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then for my mom has she's got a very interesting style of leadership in the sense that she doesn't talk much, but when she does, you listen.
It's like an eye.
So now when I received the call, I was interested in being a full-time believer.
Okay.
I wasn't interested in being a pastor at that time. I thought I would be a politician. And I thought I'd be a politician and also in the corporate world. And I made a few strides. Just before WEM, I'd made quite a few strides in terms of that journey. There were a few organizations that had made me like sort of like their voice.
Yeah.
I would find myself in meetings in, spaces like State House, or maybe there's a political meeting and I'm invited to go and say something, or maybe I actually had some political parties, some of the biggest ones, about 3, contact me to ask me to join them. And I was very ready because that's the path I thought I would take. Then when I was about 17, that's when I knew that my path was different. Mine was more to preach than politics.
Okay.
Now, at that same period, I had started university at the University of Zambia. So I think I explained it in one of my books. There was a period where it was very hard to be a student. I say feeling like all those things, are they necessary? But having the right mentors around, having people also just to keep me accountable, they emphasized. I remember there's someone who told me saying, look, finish your school, we'll discuss afterwards. So I would minister while doing my academics as well. And that's how I managed to get my first degree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome stuff. So when did you start City of the Lord Church?
City of the Lord Church, interestingly, when I was done with my first degree, I didn't think what was going to happen was now me being a pastor of a church. I thought I'd be an international guest speaker. Only being seen in Zambia once every 3 months.
Yeah. His ways are not our ways.
Exactly. And then what ended up happening is there were certain people who began to feel like they had been called to be under me.
Okay.
And these people were not going, they didn't have churches. And so what they would do is that they would wait for me Sunday afternoon, sit and say,
fellowship.
you're our pastor.
Yeah.
And so eventually, and by then the branch I was now at was the Kaumbe Square branch under Pastor Muleli.
Yeah.
And
that was August.
Yeah, that's August.
Okay.
And so I went and I said, I need to go share with him that, there's some people who are sitting and they're like, this is our pastor.
Before you're called disobedient.
And so one day I go to him and he says, Fred, it's time, right? Like I'm about to talk and then he talks and he says, it's time. Like you're going to pastor a church. And it's not something I was expecting. Pastor Daniel also starts having dreams. And Pastor Daniel's was a bit peculiar because he comes to me and says, he has a calling to start a church. That's him, Pastor Daniel. But he said, God said he won't start unless I do first. So he starts praying for me.
Yeah. Interesting.
And pushing me to the extent that when I had my first public meeting, he canceled his meeting to bring them so that at least the numbers shouldn't look bad.
Okay. Interesting.
Because starting at the church was very different from the movement. Number one,
because the movement is interdenominational.
Yes.
You are reaching a wider audience, but a church, you have to...
Yeah. And then also, we didn't run WEM in such a way that...
You were looking for members.
We're looking for members. Yeah. So would encourage them. There are a lot of people who are serving big time in churches right now. And we're the ones who preach to them and then encourage them. Have you considered going to that church? Or have you considered going to that church? So it's like when starting, it was almost like starting from scratch again. It's like you've labored before, but now you have to labor afresh.
Yeah.
I had some people who were already attached to the ministry, but for most, it was a bit interesting. The first services, it felt like I was auditioning.
Okay.
Yeah, like I'm there. Imagine that. Like I'm there preaching, and people are coming like, let's see if you can pastor. Others in their minds are like, that's the problem with these young people. So I had a lot of, I would even have pastors attending some services, like just to check me out.
Okay.
And so the first services were honestly very, I wouldn't, the first public ones, the private ones were good, but the first public ones, I wouldn't say they were my favorite.
Okay.
Yeah, it felt very.
Have you ever preached? Do you remember the first sermon you preached?
No. You know why? The first services, the private ones, were very like, they didn't have much of a structure. So it's like, they've come now.
What do we do?
I would teach them everything I've been studying that week. So we'll go from Genesis. We'll praise and worship for 1 hour, 30 minutes. Then we'll go back to Exodus. Then now when we had the first public one, that one I do remember. I still remember I taught from 1 can chase 1,000, 2 can put chest 10,000 to flight. So I was encouraging the people that God's mathematics is not like our own. And
rightly dividing the
I was
word of
rightly
truth,
dividing and I was teaching. But if I'm to be very honest, I struggled with my first sermons because preparing for a conference and for a Sunday service is not the same. For a conference, I would have like maybe 3-4 months.
You already
I'm
know
in
the
prayer
theme,
for
so,
a while.
Yeah.
And it's almost, you feel like you're getting word by word from the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Then now with a Sunday service,
It's every
week. I wouldn't
you're
say I knew
speaking
how
to the same
teach.
people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I felt a bit, for the first time in a while, I didn't feel very confident.
Mm-hmm.
Like with the conference, I would feel confident. But with the people, I thought like, am I good enough to teach them?
Yeah.
So my first sermons were a bit jumbled. I always apologize to the church for my first sermons. We laugh about it because I felt like I was trying too hard to impress them. So I'll put in 15 Greek words, which maybe are nothing wrong with Greek words, but they're not in order with them. Like I felt like I was really auditioning, you know?
So that I read KJV Tuesday because it makes me sound deep.
Exactly.
Yes, the Lord. Yeah. So did that then prompt you to now go to Bible school?
I'd already started Bible school.
Okay.
Immediately I was done with my degree.
I see.
So I was already in Bible school at that time. And it was helpful. But it was more of now like I had to fight an internal battle.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, for me, the internal battle was, it felt like there's this rule book for pastors, which no one has written.
Yeah.
But it's like there's this box you all have to fit into, which if you don't, then you're not really a pastor. So there are certain things maybe I would get impressions to do, but I would feel like, but I'm a pastor. So I'll give you an example of one day when it's settled. So one time, God gives me a song a couple of days before church. And I felt like I should sing it on Sunday and get the guitar and just sing it. Now, I didn't grow up like going to church and you find the pastor gets the guitar and sings.
Yeah.
Almost feels a bit like, yeah. So I go to church that Sunday, and that Sunday there was an issue with cholera in the country. So the army was patrolling. And I'm like in the private space, I'm being told, oh, by the way, the army is here. I'm like,
yeah.
And so you know what I did? I got to the front. I said, everyone close your eyes. And I began to sing that song. And it was a new song. It's a song none of them knew. And I'm opening my eyes, and the army, they're lifting their hands, tears, and I'm like, okay. And then there's one gentleman who came and said, you know, like, I had been looking for a church, and then when I came and I found you playing the guitar, and the way I love the guitar, I said, this is my pastor. And that day something clicked. I'm like, if somebody stays because I'm pretending to be what I'm not, I'll always have to give an impression. But if they stay, and one of the reasons they are staying is that I'm really just being myself the way God has called me, then I won't have to pretend. Like, you know, I won't have to be another person. And sometimes as pastors, I can tell you, it's not a very easy thing to be yourself, because being in the public light means you're subject to everyone's opinions. Like, you hear opinions about how you should dress, you hear opinions about how you should talk, you hear opinions about so many things.
You cannot be found in certain spaces.
Exactly.
Or even greet or be found with certain people.
You can't conduct certain weddings. You can't. You can't talk to certain people if they are known to be a certain way. So the greatest freedom for me as a pastor was just learning to follow God's calling in the way He's given it to me, while still being accountable, but just learning to follow God's calling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So City of the Lord Church starts. When did it start, by the way?
2017.
2017.
Yeah, that's when it officially launched. But we had started having like private meetings in 2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's launched in 2017. And how were the first months? Because I do understand that church in Zambia mainly relies on the tithes and offerings. It's not structured like the way it is in the Western world, where people, it's written, but they don't show up to church, they still give. Like, they've given for the whole year, like it's done. But here it's a whole different thing where you are starting out. Were you working at that point? Were you, like, how did that run? Because God has given you the vision, and the task of the vision carrier is to see to it that the vision comes to pass. And so how was the navigation?
Now, I'll be very honest. God gave us some of the most wonderful people.
Okay.
I was doing my part. I wasn't working, but I would do what I could in terms of business.
Yep.
But then God gave us people who were just amazing. Like when I sit and think about some of the earlier days, I remember the first venue I went in was like 400 kwacha per week. No, 400 kwacha for the whole month. Something like, no, 600 for the whole month.
Was it at a school?
It was at Unza Side Chapel.
Oh, okay.
Then next we moved to Siwela, which was 400 kwacha per month. And I remember the first month, I was like, how will we manage? And one person just said, okay, let me cover the first 2 months and then we recover.
Yeah.
In all honesty, we, as COL, we've never had a challenge financially.
Okay.
By a challenge, I mean we've never struggled. Of course, we've had days where, okay, you need to meet this, you need to meet this. We've never had a moment where we've not paid a bill. We've never had a moment where we're owing or anything like that. And what it's been is, it's not been, let's say, one superstar. It's been people like according to their abilities.
Yeah.
You find some are in high school, some are in college, some are working, some are in business, and they all just come and say, this is our vision. And as time went by, the structures came in now.
Yep.
You know, COVID period came. I think that's when I saw that the structures were working because people were still consistent even during the COVID, even when we're not meeting physically. We actually bought a lot of our assets during the COVID period because we had less bills.
Okay.
So in all honesty, the people have been some of the best I've ever met.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you spoke of Apostle Mwireli, where you served under him, and you still serve under him.
Currently, I'm serving under Pastor Chole.
Yes. So how about mentorship? How has it played a role in your life and your ministry? Looking at the fact that Professor Jolwe.
Yeah, Professor. Uh-huh.
Yeah. His ministry, the structure, the excellence,
You know, when I started pastoring, when I left Zaoga, one of the people that Pastor Muleli had told me, you really need to look at and follow is Pastor Jolwe.
Okay.
And if possible, get in contact with him. Like, he would be a good mentor for you. And I didn't know how to. So what I did is I stayed with the bigger meetings. And I remember one time he has a meeting for pastors and leaders, and I went there. And he said, he taught that day. Everything he taught, I went and implemented. I can, and that was like towards the beginning of our ministry. So even some of the things I'm talking about where, like, let's say financially, we've not had certain struggles that are common. It's because of what I learned in that meeting. I went and taught and implemented. And then from then on, I think for me, the biggest, I managed to get into contact with him, and he received me as a son. And the biggest period for me was the COVID period.
Okay.
When it just started, he called me and said, now I'm going to tell you how you're going to handle this period. Focus on this, focus on this, focus on this. But even as you're being aware of all these things, do not neglect the vision God has given you. That's how come in COVID period, I think we're one of the only ministries that still managed to have conferences every year. There were not the thousands, but we still managed to, and not like illegal ones. Like, we got all the necessary permissions. And he just guided me through how to handle a period like that one. Guided me through marriage, guided me through marriage counseling, guided me on how to handle criticism, how to handle, because I've had some online abuse before, how to handle that. Like, it's been, for me, mentorship has been a place where I can be vulnerable. So like, I don't have to go there and pretend
that everything is
okay. I can go there and say, Pastor, I'm not happy because ABCD, or I was dealing with this and I don't know how to deal with this, or with this problem, and I honestly don't know what to do. So I don't go, one of the earlier mistakes I made when I was starting in ministry is when I would go to somebody senior, I would give them my CV, so to say. I would present what I've achieved. And I realized that I wasn't getting much feedback. But then when I read in the scriptures that you don't boast before a king, when I am before somebody senior, I'm either listening to them or asking questions, or just telling them as it is. Like, okay, we're doing well in this, but this area, we're honestly not doing well. Could you help us? And so mentorship with Pastor has been, it has put me like years ahead. Like certain processes that we would have gone through, it's like I've submitted to someone who's already gone through the process. So
is he the one who's been prompting you to get qualifications academically as well?
Oh,
because now he's running in the professor route, so
the pastor doesn't joke around with that one.
Yeah.
From the onset, there's certain things he didn't joke around with. One of them is academic qualification. Another one is ensuring that you're also doing something business-wise and all those things, and also ensuring you've got structures, systems, and the major one, training. Like, don't stop training your people.
Definitely. You're quite an academician, like you've done school, like you're still doing school.
Yes.
What's the importance of, because there's been this consistent debate online, like you can work with your gift, school is secondary. Like, what's the importance of one, especially Christians, in these times and seasons we're at, where the world is consistently evolving? There's AI, there are all these new things popping up, and the church, I feel the church is still like behind, like big time behind. Like we don't move with the trends now. So what's the importance of the church being relevant?
Firstly, the world is supposed to learn from us.
Yeah.
In Isaiah 2 verse 2, we are told that there will be a time when the mountain of the Lord's house will be at the top. And then it says people will come
and acquire knowledge.
And they want to know. They will say, teach us your ways, teach us your laws. Now, one advantage we have as a body of Christ is that we've got an opportunity to dominate in both the spiritual and the physical realm. Imagine we are good at what the world is good at, and then we also bring to them what we are good at, which they don't know, because they can only access it by the Spirit. I'm of the belief that if you have the opportunity to get an education, whether it's a formal or informal education, you have to get it. You have to get it. So the degrees, for me, those are very important. But even if you don't have an opportunity to get them, even if the education is informal, like nowadays there's University of YouTube. A person must grow. A person must learn. And if we don't grow and if we don't learn, we'll end up submitting to those who should submit to us. So I do believe that we should rise to the top in every field. And then if I'm to speak further, education has also influenced me in the context of systems and structures, and also just understanding people. And if I may add, also sometimes, and this is not just education, I would say exposure as well, because exposure can be to books, it can be to formal learning, it can be to places. Exposure does something to you. You can meet anyone and you're not intimidated. You don't feel like you're small. And I think that's one of the things that I would advise every minister to have, at least be exposed, whether it's being exposed to knowledge or being exposed to even just places. It does something to you. The last thing you want is somebody walks in and because they're of a certain race or because they've got a PhD or because they drive a particular car, everything in you shakes. You don't want that.
Awesome. You said that professor, okay, now we no longer Dr. Joel is professor. He guided you in marriage counseling, and in your introduction, you said you're a father and a husband. How did you meet your wife?
I met her through whim. Remember that second meeting I told you about where we were invited to Vine Assemblies?
Yes.
So she happened to be one of the ushers.
Okay.
And first day, I can say she met me without me meeting her because she claims I ignored her.
Well, so it's always the case for you. Like if you are busy with,
and then, but I do remember our second interaction.
Yeah,
I had just reached, and then she went like, "Wa preacher Munishani." Now, I had never heard young people speaking Bemba. Most of the young people I knew were speaking English, so I thought she was making fun of me. Okay, she said Vashima people, so I thought she was making fun of me. So I looked at her and just moved on. Then as time went by, we became friends, and she intrigued me. She's quite introverted, so I was sort of like intrigued to enter her world, her thoughts, her mind. And as the years went by, at some point I was expecting that how I would marry is that I'll be walking in town one day, and then like there'll be this woman in a plastic, and then God will say, "That's the one." Then I'll go there and say, "Thou art bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh." That's honestly what I thought. I didn't know. And so we continued as friends. And then as time went by, I started getting an inclination, like maybe. I remember the first time I realized I liked her, I went to pray. Like I thought I'd sinned.
Cancel the
I said, "Oh God,
cleanse me.
like Father in heaven, what's going?"
Yeah.
I started realizing that when somebody's around, I'm getting a bit nervous. You know, I want to shine my shoe a bit more. And she had left to go to India to study.
Okay.
And in that period, we continued our friendship mainly over the phone and with time difference. And the friendship just grew.
Yeah.
So I think when she came back, I said, you know what, let's start seeing each other.
So you asked her out, or she as well had to hear from?
No, each person had to do their own prayers first.
Yeah.
Except I asked her out over the phone and she rebuked me. Said, "I've said yes, but should you dare engage me over the phone?"
Also, you asked her out when she was still in India.
No, she was in Osaka. I just didn't have the boldness to face her in person. Imagine, I was bold in all other areas, but I just didn't have the boldness. So she accepted, but then called for a meeting. And the meeting said, "Okay, yeah, you can ask now." And then, so tell me your future, your vision. She came with like a book with questions, like what's your vision? What's your plan for this? What's your plan for that? And I wouldn't say I had answers to all her questions. I was honest about what I knew.
Yeah.
I was honest about what I wasn't sure of. And I was honest about what was more of maybe, or it could be, or it could be. But I appreciated being asked all those questions. And then I remember she's like, "How do you plan to treat me?" And then I tell her, and she's like, "Okay, I'll hold you to that word." I'm like, like, this is scary.
Have you done like what do you call it? Like an assessment, like an
We have assessments every month.
Okay.
We actually enjoy them. We call them AGMs, which happen every month. Something I learned this from Pastor Gladys, for example. Yeah, that every month or so, go on a date, ask, "How are you doing?
Yeah.
How are you finding this?" Because the thing is, you don't remain the same person. So I'm not the same person who asked her out. I've grown.
Yeah.
There's some areas I'm still the same. Some areas have changed. Some preferences have changed, and the same with her. So we constantly try to keep check of our preferences, our transitions, and how each person is handling life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so how long was the relationship before marriage?
Trying to remember. I can say maybe 3-4 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Perhaps something like that. Because we married 2020. We married 2020.
When is your daughter's birthday?
It's either. No, my daughter's birthday should be. I always tell my wife. So, like, our wedding date, for example, is either the 20th or the 21st.
Okay.
I usually check the calendar. No, I always tell you know why? It's a blur. Like for me, like everything happens so fast
That you don't.
that I'm like, was it the 20th? Was it the 21st? Then my daughter being born, I think it's the 6th or the 7th, but it should be the 6th. So now it's a Wednesday, and my daughter was born. Like first it was a bit complicated. So my wife is in an ambulance. I'm driving after an ambulance, and we go and next thing I'm being told, "That's your daughter," and then everything was just like confusing for a moment.
Yeah.
And the only time I realized that, it was like, wait, I'm a father. And it only clicked when they gave me the bill. And they gave me the next day. So that night was like a blur. Like
The
she was
bill
born,
for the ambulance.
she was born in the evening.
Okay.
So I think I was in between the 6th and the 7th in my mind. So my mind, it resonated more on the 7th. But it's like, it was like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Next thing I'm looking at a kid. And she's got this attitude on her face, like, "Why have you removed me?"
Yeah. So now walk us through the journey of you being a father. Number one. So you're a father in faith. But now you have your own biological daughter who you're raising. How was that transition, and how has been the journey? How is the journey?
Well, at first it was very strange in the sense that growing up the last born, I never really interacted with babies. So I didn't know certain things.
Yeah.
So, first my wife was with her parents for a couple of weeks. So when she came back, I was shocked when the baby cried at 02. In my head, I'm like, "We're doing everything for you." all this provision,
Yeah.
and you can't allow us to sleep. I was like, why is this kid so entitled? And then I started, I feel like for a father, it's a bit different from a mother. A mother, you're feeling the baby from the womb. Like the process is very internal from the beginning. Then for the father and child, it starts very external first. Reason being, I felt like, does my daughter even know me? Like, do I exist?
Yeah.
Or she only cares about the one with the breast milk? And I think a lot. And then I found it like, wait, so this little girl doesn't even know that I'm a bit famous here in Zambia, or that I can buy her. I couldn't impress her with
anything.
I couldn't impress her with what I had achieved. I couldn't impress her with my academic qualifications.
Yeah.
I couldn't impress her with food because all she was having was breast milk. So I couldn't say, let me go buy you this.
Yeah.
So I decided, you know what? The best gift I can give her is my presence. So I started finding a way to bond with her. So I started singing for her, writing her songs. And interestingly, almost every song would watch together or sing together. And this is like someone who was like a month. Right now, she can sing them.
Awesome. Well, I do get to see her play the guitar, the keyboard. And
So that was me saying, okay, I can't, like, that was me realizing that all this material stuff and the like, what my daughter really needed was Fred. So she needed me. So I just needed to be me with her.
Okay.
And it's been beautiful. Yeah. She's interesting with a bit of attitude.
The attitude which you first saw. Yeah. Awesome. Look, there are many young ministers, many young people who look up to you. And what words would you give somebody who, number one, is an aspiring minister, or they have this calling, or they have these academic goals which they want to achieve, and they're finding it hard? What are your words?
You have to start from where you are. So I'll start with, let's say, you've got a desire to preach to people.
Yeah.
One of the challenges a lot of young ministers make is that they start coveting other people's platforms. So they're thinking, the day Apostle Fred gives me a Dominion conference, I'll show those people. One thing that I did is I created my own platforms. So what I would do is, I was at Unza by then.
Yeah.
I preached in, I don't know how many rooms. I would go there, hi guys, do you just want some encouragement? Whether it's 2 people, whether it's 3 people. As time went by, those are the same people who, when they saw a flyer, they were like, we know him.
Yeah.
People have social media. Like, create your own platform. Don't covet other people's, because they've worked very hard for them.
Yeah.
But then, on the other hand, when you're in a period where you're finding things hard, be encouraged that you're not the first one. Remember David, remember Joseph. You can literally have an encounter with God, and yet things are still quite hard. There was a period where David had the kingdom, but Saul had the throne. And what did David do? He behaved himself wisely before King Saul. So he didn't cancel himself out of something that was going to be a blessing for him.
Yep.
And then also, when you're in a difficult period, don't forget to still help people.
Yep.
Joseph didn't say, let me wait until the dreams are fulfilled for me to start prophesying.
Yep.
While Joseph was in prison, he was still using his gift. As a matter of fact, he prophesied his way out, because he was a breakthrough to someone when he needed a breakthrough himself. So never forget to still just keep being a good person. Be a breakthrough to people. And even with regards to academics and the like, for me, here's one thing I always tell people with academics. If you have the opportunity, do it now. Don't procrastinate. It never gets easier. It never. And as life goes on, you get busier. So if you've got the opportunity, let's say your grade 12 is a challenge, go back and rewrite. Because if you just sit there being embarrassed for 6 years, what will happen is that those who are in grade 6 right now will have the grade 12 certificate. So just go back and redo it. Like, it never gets easier. You have to fight. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Last one just came up.
Sure.
I'm passionate about relationships, and looking at the fact that we are recording a lot of high cases of divorce, a lot of killings. What's your prayer? What's your take? What's that word you'd give to somebody who is struggling in that relationship, in that marriage? Yeah.
For starters, it's very unfortunate that things have reached a place of killings, a place of abuse. And I can tell you, even as a pastor, that if you're being threatened, physically or you're being physically abused, even according to the courts of law, at least you have to come out of that environment because your life is more precious.
Yes.
Remember, it's not about social media. It's not about what people think. Your life firstly is precious.
Yes.
But then now, when it comes to relationships in general, for you to really enjoy marriage, you must still believe in the institution of marriage. You must believe that it's an institution God loves. You must believe that it's got principles which are timeless, principles which are not subject to trends, principles which are not which don't change because of what's been going on around. And if you can get those principles and then create your own world with your spouse, trust me, you'll have a beautiful time. Marriage is still a beautiful thing. It's still an amazing thing.
Awesome. Thank you very much. This has been a great conversation. I think this is the most lengthy conversation we've had.
Really? Yeah, I've enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I really have. And thank you for the awesome work you're doing
Thank
and the platform you're giving other people
Thank
to
you.
tell their stories.
Yeah. Awesome. So looking forward to many more books coming up. I do know you have books. What are the titles of the books and where can they be
So,
found?
Jesus the Healer, A Friend from Another Dimension, I Will Be Their God, The Return from the Mountain, and The Faithful Man.
Okay.
So they can be found currently right at our church office at Meadowin Business Park,
Okay.
or they can just reach out to us on any of our platforms and we'll have them sent.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you have enjoyed this podcast episode with Apostle Fredrick Kaluluma. Remember, God has called you, and if He has called you, He will provide. He will walk with you. He will be the pillar of fire by night and the cloud by day. I love you, but the good Lord loves you more. Remember to like, share, subscribe. See you on the other side. Bye-bye.